can't believe I'm making this video. I cannot believe. Okay, so two big stories broke yesterday that I want to cover in this video today. First, Disney announced that they are closing the Star Wars Galactic Starcruiser, the hotel, the Star Wars themed hotel at Walt Disney World. They're closing it. If that wasn't enough, Disney also announced yesterday that they have canceled the Lake Nona project. That's the billion-dollar project that was going to take all of Walt Disney Imagineering and send it over to Florida. Each on their own are pretty big news stories, and I know that people have a lot of questions, especially about the Galactic Starcruiser thing. I mean, my goodness, there are a lot of questions, and actually, as it turns out, I think I've got some answers for you. Well, at least answers that I feel are logical from my view from the cheap seats. For example, why did the Galactic Starcruiser fail? What's going to happen to the hotel now? Why did Disney just straight up choose to close the hotel completely? Why didn't they at least try to figure something out? Why didn't they lower the prices? And on that last one especially, I think I've got an answer. We're going to get to that in a minute. But first, let's start off with some of the basics. The Galactic Starcruiser, it's a hotel. It's an experience that grew out of the evolution. It evolved from Galaxy's Edge. It's supposed to be a boutique, small hotel, just 100 rooms, a boutique experience, as they call it, offered guests an opportunity to, I guess, basically role play is the best possible word that I could think of for the situation. A one-of-a-kind experience where you get to be part of an actual Star Wars story. And the development began just after Galaxy's Edge opened. As I mentioned, it's kind of an evolution of that. And in fact, offered some of the same type of entertainment that guests were supposed to get in Galaxy's Edge. In fact, some might suggest that a lot of the stuff that we didn't get, that we were promised in Galaxy's Edge, they wound up sending that off to the Galactic Starcruiser so that they could monetize stuff that we were supposed to be getting for free at Galaxy's Edge. But forgive the fact that they didn't put that stuff in the park. It turns out people didn't want it. That's a conversation we're also going to hold off for in a minute, but forgive them that. It was a high concept idea. In fact, a very risky one that Disney actually, I'm surprised they took that on. Disney relies too heavily on IPs and reskins for their attractions. So this was really, when you think about it, and that they don't get enough credit for this, they really don't. This was completely out of the ordinary for them. It was a big risk, but they did it, and it failed. But the problem here wasn't the concept. The concept was great, actually, I think. I think it was a great idea. The problem was that it was just too darn expensive. Too expensive, at least, to reach enough people to fill all those suites year after year. Actually, they never even got to the year after year part. It lasted just 443 days since it opened to the announcement. That is just, roughly 15 months. Imagine that. 15 months and Disney just canceled it. That is shocking that they didn't give it more time. They didn't try something. They just said, it's over. It's not working. It's over. Just kill it. That suddenness, I think that there's a reason for that suddenness. And again, that's the thing that we're going to get into, but we've got more to talk about here. I want to talk about the price. The most obvious reason for its failure is that it was too expensive, right? For the most part, yes, but that's something that they could have overcome that. Lots of things that Disney offer are too expensive for you and me, but then Disney isn't trying to sell those things to you and me. They're not trying to sell me Club 33. They're not trying to sell you and me Adventures by Disney with vacation packages that go upwards of $100,000 per guest. They're for sale, yes, but they're not selling them. And that's a distinction that a lot of people made, in terms of how, people were exposed to this to a much greater degree. They were exposed to the Galactic Starcruiser than they ever would have been, or ever will be, to what, Adventures by Disney or Club 33. So optically, it doesn't sit well with a lot of guests that there's this thing out there that is being, sold to us, but it's completely out of our reach. Guests felt left out in a way that they don't feel about Club or Adventures by Disney. And it's why so many people, I think, were, I don't know if celebrating is the right word. There was a lot of people out there saying, I told you, it's too expensive. This was never going to work. I'm glad it didn't work because it was too, it's only for the rich people or whatever. But in that way, I don't think that the cost was the ultimate reason. I mean, again, you could make the case that it was, but it's not the ultimate reason. It's why I didn't go, but it's not the reason why the hotel is closing. I believe the reason why it's closing is because they couldn't bring enough of those people back again. Certainly, there's going to be a lot of guests out there who, have a definite desire to experience the Galactic Starcruiser. And by the way, it was great. Everybody I talked to said they had a great time at the Galactic Starcruiser. It was great. Worth it is another conversation. I'm not even going to try to get into that. But the actual experience was great. There were lots of people who had the desire to do that, and there was also lots of people who had thousands of dollars that they were willing to spend on the experience. But I do get the feeling that those who did go and who could go, who did have the expendable income for this, once they went, that's it. They're done. They're good. That was enough. They don't need to go again, at least not for a while. Now, part of this, again, that is the cost. The argument there is, well, they're not going to go again for a while because $6,000 is a lot to spend for really what is kind of a limited event. You're not going to do that every 6 months, every year. Maybe next year you go to Paris. Maybe next year, you do a whole different thing. Maybe you just do regular, good old-fashioned Walt Disney World. But what if? And this is where I think Disney miscalculated. I think they miscalculated on two things. First, I think they miscalculated on guests' desire to participate in this kind of role-playing experience. I mean, it sounds great when you're brainstorming for ideas, finding new ways to entertain guests. What if we could bring them in? What if they could participate in the world of Star Wars? What if we brought them into the lore? What if we let them pilot the Millennium Falcon? It sounds awesome. And it's the very foundation of Galaxy's Edge. And it didn't work. It didn't work out. Most guests just want to be entertained. They don't want to be responsible for their own entertainment. It's actually kind of uncomfortable for most guests, I would imagine. As I mentioned in our live stream last night, Disney is having a hard enough time getting guests to participate on the very most basic levels, getting them to say things like bright suns and rising moons. That's good morning and good evening in Star Wars land. They can't even get guests to participate at the most basic level. And that's because most of them have no idea, no concept that that's even a thing, that's even supposed to be a thing at Galaxy's Edge. Most people are oblivious to that when they go there. The average guest, I think, as I watch and observe, a lot of guests just want to go into Galaxy's Edge, wait in a not too terrible length queue for Rise of the Resistance, and get chased around by Kylo Ren for 6 minutes. That's it, right? And I know that's a long way off from the conversation about the Galactic Starcruiser, but that's just a question of scale. There are simply too few of us who want to say things like bright suns and pay $6,000 to do it. Let's go ahead and assume that there doesn't have to be all of us, but there are at least enough of them to make the hotel sustainable. So what happens to those guests? Why didn't they come back? Why aren't they coming back? Well, I believe that it's because Disney failed to provide stakes. If you're going to ask guests to participate in a role play and to play in a game, there need to be winners and there need to be losers. Disney being afraid to disappoint a guest leads to a very generic experience. There need to be stakes in order to create more energy and more emotion, more excitement. Heck, how about not just winners and losers? How about a winner? How about a leaderboard where there is somebody who actually wins the Galactic Starcruiser and maybe they get to have that face-off with Kylo Ren or somebody at the end of the trip. But I know that's probably impossible and that's asking a lot. So absent that, there at least needs to be some sort of varied experience. We're talking about the Galactic Starcruiser as being something of a game, right? And to use a gamer's term, there needs to be replayability. The Empire, for example, they should win every now and then. You should go and say, did that thing happen for you? Did this thing happen to you while you were there? Did you win? Did the Empire win? Compare your experience with mine. Oh, I like your experience. I think I want to go back again and see if I can't make that happen. And it didn't happen again. I think I've got to go back a third time. And I think that's where it all boils down to. I'm sure, yes, it was too expensive, but I mean, you could have overcome that with a better experience, a more varied experience. And it really is a shame because while I would have preferred that Disney had fulfilled their promise when they started first pitching us Galaxy's Edge, fulfilled that promise of having, this experience, this kind of experience in Galaxy's Edge. Well, like I said, it wouldn't have worked out anyway, but I would have rather that they fulfilled that promise instead of taking it out and monetizing it somewhere else. I really didn't appreciate that. That's something that I have been saying for a while, and it bothered me that they sold Galaxy's Edge to us in a way that sounded a lot of fun, and then they took it all away and they made us pay for it. Well, I didn't because I wouldn't go. That's part of the reason actually why I objected. I mean, obviously $6,000 is a lot of money, but I just consciously, as I've said about some things, sometimes you just have to be a conscientious objector. Anyway, it's a shame. In spite of all that, it's still a shame because I do have to give them credit for at least trying to do something out of their comfort zone, to do something that was very risky, and it's not a thing that you can recover from. Okay, if the Galactic Starcruiser doesn't go well, you can't. There's no way to pivot that. Let's talk about that because I can't even begin to guess what this hotel must have cost. I mean, it's got to be a couple $100 million, right? Add that on, by the way, to the cost of Harmonious at Epcot down the way. That had to be another, well, you know what? I don't know, $100 million for Harmonious, right? And there's another show, another entertainment that didn't even make it to 2 years. Can you imagine? They went through all that trouble and expense to build this really one-of-a-kind experience, Harmonious, that, by the way, by all accounts, was a delightful, wonderful show, provided you only saw it at night and you didn't see it during the day because those barges were, quite atrocious to look at in the middle of the day out there in the middle of the harbor. Disney lost a ton of money on those two projects, both of which were cutting edge, risky, creative decisions. They lost a bunch of money, and I feel like it's going to impact, in a negative way, Disney's decision making in the future. It's going to impact their willingness to take risks in the future, especially considering how fragile their bottom line is these days, how fragile things are with the company that, that they're trying to save money. That I can't even begin to guess. It's going to be rough. It's going to be rough for 100 years. They won't make a decision like the Galactic Starcruiser for another 100 years, man. So with that said, well, what's going to happen to the actual hotel itself, the physical hotel? I feel like my best guess is nothing. Literally nothing. I think it's going to stay vacant for a long while. It's backstage, for one thing, so it's not like it's an eyesore that they need to address at any point. Nobody can see this building. And I believe that there's very little chance that they'll put more money into the building to turn it into something else. Some have suggested they turn it into just a regular hotel, a Star Wars themed hotel, mind you, but just a regular hotel. I don't think there's any chance at all of that happening. And that's because of the way it was built. This is a building that was purpose-built for just this one thing. I mean, sure, they could modify it, but what's the point of that? Turn it into some small, average-looking building that sits backstage with views of nothing but air conditioning units and waste management facilities? This plus the aforementioned cost to do anything like that makes it, it's prohibitive. They're going to strip it and sell it for parts. And I know that's drastic, but that's all this building could ever have been, is the Galactic Starcruiser, and that's it. And that actually also answers another question. Why didn't Disney try to salvage it somehow? Change the show. Lower the price and they could have filled that place for 100 years, people had said. But they couldn't. They couldn't do anything. I said a while back when the hotel was floundering, everybody could see it. I said they can't reduce the price because reducing the price would make it unprofitable because it costs so much more money to operate. You have all those paid performers on stage. You have all that production design, all of that, magnificent food that's creative and original. So if you change the price, now you have to dilute the product. You have to make cuts. You have to trim the fat. You have to hire fewer actors. You have to serve less interesting food. And you do that, and now you've dug yourself an even bigger hole because the whole point, of the Galactic Starcruiser's existence, its mere existence, is predicated on the fact that this is the most unique, interesting, one-of-a-kind experience that you'll ever have anywhere forever. And for that, it'll cost you $6,000. You turn it into something that is average and normal, there's no reason for anybody to go there now. Even if it's just a start, there's just no reason for it to exist. In fact, and this is going to sound crazy, I believe that the only way that they could have saved the Galactic Starcruiser was to make it better, spend more money, hire more actors, better actors, put on more show, add more texture, then raise the price even more, make it even more exclusive, and then stop trying to sell it to you and me, but sell it to the people who can't afford it. You know, not everything needs to be for everything. Club, Adventures by Disney, you know, that's not for everyone. Some things are just, unfortunately, I know it sounds terrible, some things are just for the people who can afford it. You know what I mean? But that's the problem, is that we understand intuitively that Club 33 is not for us. We understand that Adventures by Disney is not for us. Star Wars is for everyone. Star Wars belongs to all of us. We all feel a sense of ownership. So when we look at this Galactic Starcruiser and we see Star Wars in there, we feel like it's supposed to be for us. And it's just not. So really, the decision to scrap the hotel in general is actually, it turns out to be kind of an easy one because there's no place for them to go. The Galactic Starcruiser was always doomed. And so I feel like they just decided to rip off the Band-Aid and say, that's it, it's over, it's done. It's a wild story. It's a wild story. You know what's really wild is that this story broke, I mean, not maybe less than an hour after the Lake Nona story, which is wild. I was just finishing sort of like digesting the Lake Nona thing, and then this happens to the point where I couldn't believe it. I couldn't believe it. So let's talk about that for a second. Let's talk about Lake Nona. It's a site in Florida where Disney was preparing a huge campus for the Imagineering team. They were going to move all of Imagineering to Lake Nona, Florida. It was going to be this impressive billion-dollar project. They were going to employ 2,000 people. I'm using reports that have been circulating for years. 2,000 people at an average salary of $120,000 per person, which tells me that this is a major thing, and this is a desirable thing for the community, for Lake Nona and for the state of Florida. Very desirable. And then Disney canceled that project, which is interesting considering the current climate, the current state of things between Disney and the state of Florida. Backstory, Lake Nona was first announced back in 2021 as we were coming out of the lockdowns. Disney was going to move the entire Walt Disney Imagineering team to Florida in order to take advantage of a $570 million tax credit being offered by the state of Florida. They said, build your campus here and we'll give you this $570 million tax credit over the next 20 years. Now, the move was not received well, namely because Disney gave their Imagineering team, who was almost completely, here in Burbank in Southern California, they said, you can either, they gave them an ultimatum, you can either come over to Florida with us or quit. There were to be, under the original plan, no Imagineering jobs remaining in Southern California. And they weren't given a lot of time to decide. They were asked to make that decision pretty quickly, which is a big deal because, people have families and homes, et cetera. So it didn't go over very well, now that's also interesting because it's been 2 years since that initial announcement, and they still have not so much as broken ground. They made people make these changes without having even moved any dirt in Florida at Lake Nona. It's still grass. I heard the live stream yesterday. It's still just grass. They haven't even broke ground. Now, forward a bit to Disney relieving themselves of Bob Chapek and bringing in Bob Iger. And at that time, I immediately thought, well, okay, that's it. Lake Nona project is dead. I mentioned that, and I think in a video or on Twitter or something like that. I thought for sure the Lake Nona project was dead because that was a Chapek decision. That was a Chapek move. And obviously, they were trying to retcon the Chapek era. They were trying to undo so many of his decisions, and it was happening fast. So I thought for sure they were going to cancel that project right away. They didn't. Iger was asked about it in the town hall, and I believe his response was that he hadn't decided yet. He wasn't sure. They were looking at it, and it was kind of a non-answer. But then a few weeks later, we heard that they were going to keep the project going, that it was going to happen, but it had been delayed. They weren't going to start, I think, until 2026, if memory serves. Now, forward again to the escalating feud between the Disney company and the state of Florida, and now it appears that not even $570 million is enough to keep Disney in the Lake Nona project. Now, obviously, having said that, that suggests that this is a response to that, and it's probably true, at least to some degree. But remember this: I don't think that Disney was all that invested, all that committed to Lake Nona ever. I don't think they were ever fully committed to it. Well, maybe Chapek was, but ever since he was gone, that became a non-thing. Well, maybe even before that, because as I mentioned, they never even got to the point of clearing the work site completely to get it prepped to build. This is something that happened. The announcement was in late 2021, I think. They were supposed to start land clearing in 2021. It was supposed to be an 18-month project. They were supposed to be wrapping that up right now. The whole campus was supposed to be done by now. But the fact that they haven't even broke ground suggests to me that they were never committed to this thing. So whether or not it's a response to Florida, it's hard to say. I mean, obviously, one could say that at least this situation was the last. There's just no point. There's no point in going forward now. They may have been thinking about it, this and that, and they were trying to, but no, it's over now. But with that, the good news is that, as I mentioned, Walt Disney Imagineering, now it seems logical that they're going to stay here in Burbank, where it belongs, close to home, close to the parks, close to an incredible talent pool in Southern California, creators and engineers, just the way it should be. That, in my opinion, it's the way it should be for all time. And so I'm happy that that's back. And hopefully they will tender some offers to those Imagineering cast who did choose to stay here in Southern California. Hopefully they haven't found work elsewhere. Well, actually, hopefully they did. I would rather they be employed, but let's just hope that they were able to, curate some of those that had got left behind and bring them back into the Imagineering fold. And Disney needs, now more than ever, good quality people in the everywhere, but Imagineering especially. I believe, just like I was talking about with the Galactic Starcruiser, I believe the way out of darkness is not to hold back. It's not to shrink and shy away from things, to cut costs. I think the way out of this is to go for it, is to grow and make things better, and to just give until it hurts. And when I say give, I mean give us product, give us a great show, make things better than they've ever been. You do that and we'll show up. Sorry for the rant. I'm not done. Thanks for watching, everybody. I hope you enjoyed. Let us know your thoughts on this. I know it's a kind of a divisive topic, interesting topic, but let us know your thoughts, and then thanks for watching. Be safe out there. Be kind to one another. Fresh baked.